Admiral James Stavridis, retired United States Navy, joins me, former Allied Supreme Commander and the author of a brand new novel, The Restless Wave. Admiral, I got to say, in 1971, Herman Wouk captured my imagination with The Winds of War. In 1978, he had a sequel, War and Remembrance. They're still great books, but I am glad you were doing for this generation what Herman Wouk did for mine, which is educate them through story about the stakes and the men and women who fought World War II. Was that your intention, just to educate?
It was very much so. And, Winston Churchill said, the further you want to look into the future, the more you must look into the past. And so, as I think about, as you and I've discussed so many times, the possibility of great power war in the Pacific with China today, we don't have to imagine what that would look like. We can go back to the Second World War 80 years ago and look at the war we fought and won with Japan. So, absolutely wanted to educate, wanted to shine a light on great power war, also new technology coming into war. And finally, as you started, with pointing out that sometimes young men and in today's world, young women have to stand and deliver for their country. That were the big themes of the work, The Restless Wave.
The Restless Way is fabulous, and I am prejudiced. I have to admit, full disclosure to the audience, a character in this novel is the fetching Mrs. Hewitt's uncle. Another is her grandfather. Admiral Stav, last night he became a grandfather again for the sixth time. That will be the great-great-grandfather of the new baby girl who will be eligible to go to the United States Naval Academy, as you did. But the class of 41 had a number of significant people in it, and I heard one of the CNOs, John Richardson, say that all of our submarine captains, not all, but many of our submarine captains, skippers, at the start of World War II, we're not really ready for the war. Is that going to show up eventually in this?
Yeah, very much so in the sequel to The Restless Wave, which begins in 1944. So, The Restless Wave, the book we're talking about, follows a young man from Key West in the 30s. He decides to go to the Naval Academy, and then he graduates with that storied class of 1941, graduates almost 6 months early because the Navy knows war is coming. So they land in the Pacific, and not just the submariners, no one was ready for that war. And of course, the character you're talking about, Joe Tossig, ends up in Pearl Harbor and standing on a battleship and suffers a grievous wound at the very start of the book. And the through line to our submariners is they ended up being the most highly blooded portion of the U.S. Navy. We lost 10% of them in combat, but boy, did they deliver for the nation once we fixed the torpedoes, got them in the right pose, gave them the tactics. They went to war.
What I very much appreciate, Admiral, is that you included the story of Admiral Tossig, young Joe's dad, who got cashiered by FDR because they got, as you said, cross threads over Japan. Not many people know that story. I don't know that you ran the Naval Institute, so of course you know that story. Let me turn now to our current Navy under fire in the Gulf. Yesterday, Americans struck militias in Baghdad. Do you expect the pace of response to accelerate as Israel invades Lebanon?
I think the pace of response, particularly to the Houthis down south, is going to increase. In other words, the global shipping community, I think, is finally arriving at the realization that we can't simply stumble along, allowing merchant ships like the one you're showing here to simply be taken down by a bunch of Iranian trained operators. And I know many folks are on radio with us, but for those who get a chance to watch the YouTube that Hugh just put up, you're seeing the Houthi rebels take down a commercial warship. And hey, these are not the Somali pirates of 20 years ago that I fought when I was NATO commander. Those were skinny kids in flip-flops with rusty AK-47s. These are Iranian-trained Navy SEAL wannabes who are landing on a merchant ship, streaming out of a modern helicopter, completely kitted out, and ruthlessly taking down this huge vessel. We cannot permit that to go on, nor should we.
Now, Admiral, I want to turn over to the IDF. Earlier this morning, Michael Duran, who's a pretty good Iran expert, posted a video of Kaaba, Lebanon, which is north of Marjua Yuan, which I can't say any of these names. They've blown up the roads, and Michael speculated that's to prevent reinforcements coming from Bekaa. And I responded, they don't want a Falaise Gap. They don't want Hezbollah scootering away. What do you think it is, destroying the north-south road in Lebanon?
I think once again, you've shown us you're quite a good military strategist. Without question, the Israelis are going to shut down probably 20 plus miles into Lebanon, and the reason is quite simple. I can tell you the reason in 2 words: 7 October, meaning that having witnessed the Hamas terrorists streaming across their borders, raping, murdering, mutilating, kidnapping, the Israelis will never permit that to occur again. They're certainly not going to permit Hezbollah to do it from the north. To avoid that, they have to create a pretty deep buffer zone, which I think they will ultimately militarize a great part of it. And that'll be somewhere between 15 and 20 miles inland up to the Litani River. That would be the advice I would be giving the Israelis if I were wearing the uniform of the IDF this morning.
Now, Admiral, I want to close by asking you to sort of opine on the last 2 weeks, because there are levels of military efficacy which range from bad to extraordinary, off the charts 10. So, with poor execution, disastrous results being 0, and 10 being whatever is the most extraordinary, maybe the Osama bin Laden takedown by our special forces in Pakistan. Where do you rate the last 2 weeks from getting Hanaya in Tehran to getting the chief of staff, and then the Radwan force, and then Nasrallah, the beepers, the walkie-talkie, all of it? How do you rate the last 2 weeks?
I'd give them a 9 out of 10. And the only reason I wouldn't give them a 10 out of 10 is because of the collateral damage, the civilians killed. And that is always an unfortunate consequence, particularly if you're going after particularly high value targets. But let's be honest here. Let's be real here. The reason there is collateral damage is because these terrorist organizations are using civilians deliberately and ruthlessly as human shields. And therefore, the Israelis, who have a military mission to conduct, are going after killers who have not only the blood of Israelis on their hands, but also the blood of Americans. So I think the last 2 weeks have been extraordinary in terms of pure offensive military efficacy. Secondly, in terms of technological execution, particularly the caper with the beepers. Thirdly, where there have been collateral damage, civilians, they've done all they can to minimize it. You can't be perfect in that regard. And no military operation is ever perfect, but I'd give them a strong 9 out of 10.
Last question, Admiral. You were serving when the American embassy in Beirut was blown up in April of 1983, and when the Marine Corps barracks was bombed in October of 1983. Jack Carr and James Scott have a new book out, eerily timed for this week, called Targeted Beirut, which goes back through the 1983 operation. They were never avenged. The Marines and the diplomats who were killed, and the CIA people that were killed in those 2 attacks, were never avenged. Cap Weinberger pulled everybody out, recommended Reagan. I didn't get to the Reagan administration until '85, but I was talking with a alumni yesterday. That was quite the screw up and disaster. Do you think Marines were enjoying this weekend perhaps a little bit more than other Americans?
Yes, they were, and so were members of the class of 1976 from the U.S. Naval Academy. That would be my class. Our first classmate who died in combat on active duty, Captain Vince Smith, I'll say his name again. Captain Vince Smith died in that barracks bombing. I knew him well at Annapolis. Rest in peace, classmate.
That's a punctuation that I cannot improve on. I hope you enjoyed Targeted Beirut as much as I'm enjoying The Restless Wave. Admiral Stavridis, good to talk to you as always. Look forward to talking to you when the book drops. I don't want to give anything more away about The Restless Wave other than you ought to go and order it right now at Amazon, because it's going to go out of print, and then it's going to have to get reprinted, and you're going to have to wait unless you have a pre-order in. So go and get it, The Restless Wave. Herman Wouk really, it became a miniseries, and I'm here to tell Hollywood, to my friends in Hollywood, go option The Restless Wave. I don't know that the Admiral intended to build it into a streaming miniseries. The first successful miniseries, in my view, was The Winds of War and War and Remembrance. The least successful miniseries of my youth was Shogun. It's terrible. So they've redone Shogun, and it's pretty good. I don't want them to redo The Winds of War. Everybody knows how that story ends, and everybody saw that series. The Restless Wave is a new story, a new plot line with new characters in new places, and it's got big guns in it. Big guns. Battleship guns, at least at the beginning. And the plebes and the upperclassmen at the class of 1941 in Annapolis, expertly described by a man who lived there, did not know that the Admiral lost a classmate in Beirut. Wish I'd known that when I talked to Jack Carr and James Scott yesterday. Their book is Targeted Beirut, but the Admiral's new book is The Restless Wave.